for inviting me, and thanks to everybody who's here. So I thought I would give a fairly short presentation, kind of doing a quick deep dive into transit technology. I've pretty much built my career on it, and it continues to interest me no matter how many years I've been in the industry, and thought you all would enjoy hearing a few things about it, although I bet a bunch of you out there probably know more than I do. But anyway, going to do a quick deep dive into some of the kind of back office systems. And unlike some of the presentations that have already been given today, I'm not going to talk about the process of deciding on technology. We've already had some really good presentations about that. That's another one of my favorite topics, but I'll leave that to them. They've already done a great job, and we'll have a few more later today. So what's in the back office? What's actually on the bus? I want to talk a little bit about how does all of this work with some of our newer federal concepts, like somebody making a trip from point A to point B that's technology enabled. You know, how does all this technology fit into that? I'll talk very briefly about some trends and then some really good improvements that are being made on technology. So this is a really busy, for people who like flowcharts, you should be happy. For those who don't like them, sorry about that. I actually like them. But what I'm showing you here, sort of in the center of the chart, are really the kind of key back office systems that are operating to ensure that we've got operational technologies for dispatchers, for planners, for customer service agents, and eventually for the public, because a lot of the information that's being generated is going to end up in the public eye, whether it's on real-time signs or alerts on their smartphone. But here, basically, we've got servers dedicated for looking at vehicle location, passenger counting, and voice announcements that are made on board buses. We've got an interface with fixed route scheduling. Also, on the demand response side, we have a connection to the demand response scheduling as well. And we also have a really important connection to the communications systems that are operating on board. And that would be either a radio or a digital system that's cellular in nature, although you can have both, and a lot of systems have both. I show this sort of on the left-hand side of the chart here, where you might have a voice radio system as well as a cellular system. But some of the key sort of passenger-facing elements are here, where I've got on the left-hand side here a dynamic message sign, or DMS. And then we've got third-party developers who are taking the information that's being generated by the technologies on board the buses or other transit vehicles and turning them into passenger information. We've got websites, transit agency websites that you can go to and get the same information. We've also usually got interactive voice response, where someone can call in and get the information. And then we're also tying it together with other systems on board the vehicle. So this represents the back office. if we want to look at what's actually on board a transit vehicle, and here I'm using a bus as an example, we potentially have a lot of systems that are really hidden from passenger view. There's quite a few of them that are constantly operating, but the passenger wouldn't have a clue about it. And so we're keeping track of the health of the technologies on board. So that's one big thing that we're doing kind of behind the scenes. You know, is there a problem with the passenger counting system? Is there a problem with the vehicle location system? Those kinds of things we want to bring back to the transit agency so that they can remedy those problems. But we also have other things on board that are really critical for safety and security. For example, a covert alarm where the vehicle operator can indicate immediately that there's some kind of problem on board and potentially get public safety involved. We've got our vehicle location, which is critical to the whole operation, particularly the dispatchers back in the dispatch office looking at how the operation is going. We're also communicating with the vehicle operator via some kind of mobile data terminal, these days, primarily tablets. We have onboard signage that's communicating with the passengers. What's the next stop? They could request a stop that might display on the interior dynamic message sign, you know, that you requested a stop. You've also got the audible part of that, which is our automated vehicle announcements that are tied in directly to that over the public address system. And there's usually some kind of ambient noise control. We want to know if the wheelchair lift has been deployed. This is something that's extremely important before the vehicle goes out for service. So we want to make sure that that lift has been cycled before the vehicle leaves the garage. And there are a couple of other systems here, like connecting the head sign with the other technologies on board so that automatically the destination of the vehicle and via points or waypoints are being displayed on the head sign outside the vehicle. And the other safety and security feature that's often on board are cameras. So that's great. Where are we kind of moving with all of this? And I wanted folks to start thinking, you know, a little bit differently about how we're doing some of this. So years ago, when we started to put technology on vehicles, we didn't really have the cloud per se. We certainly didn't have cloud storage. We had storage back in a closet in a transit agency. And now we're actually utilizing the cloud a lot. We can utilize it directly from the vehicle now. Obviously, the back office can be communicating with the cloud. We've got all kinds of equipment now that give us sort of, if you look at the Internet of Things and the devices that can be put on board, we've got a way of communicating again with our back office as well as with the cloud. And we're actually able to do a lot of computations that need to be done when we're communicating with the public. And the one that always comes to mind, because this is an area that I've worked in a lot, is telling people at the next bus stop, when is the next bus going to arrive? And that's running a lot of data through a model to do your prediction of estimated time of arrival at all of the upstream stops. So now we're actually doing some edge computing, and we can do the computing now almost anywhere. We could do it in the cloud. We can do it in the back office. We could actually do it on board the vehicle, which we typically don't do a lot of that anymore. But we've also given the vehicle operator a lot more information as they're running the service. And we've given the customer a lot more personalized services. They can subscribe to alerts just about their particular routes that they use on a daily basis. That's something that I certainly did when I was commuting by transit. So let's put this in a little bit of perspective. We've got all this awesome onboard technology. We've got a lot of back office technology. So that's great. I'm certainly enthralled with it and have been my whole career. But what are we really doing with it to help the passenger? And that's really been the focus at the federal level in the technology space, that we're giving people information that they never had before when they're going from point A to point B. And that's being called at the federal level the complete trip. There are several demo projects that are going on at the federal level right now that are really exploring the use of current technology to take you from point A to point B. So what are you doing with the technology as a traveler? You can plan your trip, and you can now get real-time information that tell you if the trip that you planned is changing in any way because of delays. Today here in the Boston area, this is a very good example because we got 2 feet of snow yesterday. So your vehicle might be delayed or a trip might be missed. So you want to immediately know about that. And I think as passengers, a lot of us expect that. We couldn't do it without the technology. What if you don't know how to get to your first place where you're taking transit or your destination? You might need navigation. Well, there you go. We've got technology to help you navigate from where you're from your home or your office or wherever you are to a transit stop, or when you get off the vehicle where you're going finally. And we have some other technology that's not even on board a transit vehicle or in the back office. And those are things like crossing an intersection. If you have certain types of disabilities, this could be a challenge for you to safely cross an intersection, but now we've got technology to help you with that. And we now have a lot of technology out there to facilitate you paying for your trip. And you can pay basically before you even get on the vehicle and have your mobile payment either on your phone or with a smart card or a couple of other different types of devices. Like I showed you on the original screen, you could even have a wristband that actually contains your transit pass. So we've really sort of expanded the use of technology. When I got involved in this too many years ago to admit to you, these technologies really were pretty limited and only used for operational purchases. So here's a good example of somebody making a trip. They're using their smartphone to plan the trip. They're trying to get to the first transit stop or station. Then they might get on the vehicle. And in this case, Andy happens to have a visual impairment. and really needs to be alerted as to when he's getting close to the stop he's interested in. He's got to cross the street, and then he's using navigation to get to his final destination. So a lot of technology there. I've been writing some sort of predictions about technology-enabled mobility for the last several years for a magazine called Intelligent Transport. And I try to sort of look ahead, you know, what's coming this year? What are the kinds of things that are happening? And back before we knew there was going to be a pandemic, in fact, I wrote this article February 1st as I was flying home from a business trip to Florida. Didn't know that I wouldn't be on a plane for about 18 months afterwards. But there was a lot of discussion in the industry about having 15-minute cities, which is something that Singapore did several years ago, but it really requires a number of these kinds of technologies. We've talked a huge amount, and I could spend a whole day on mobility as a service. I'm not going to, but that really requires some of these technologies as well. Automated vehicles, which I'm not going to really get into a lot here, but obviously we need a heck of a lot of technology, and in some cases a lot more than what we have now for that to work. I did talk about the complete trip. There's a little bit going on in AI right now in public transit. Curb management is a discussion that a lot of us have been having the last few years, where the curb can be used for multiple purposes, but because those purposes could change based on the time of day, we need some technology to tell us if the purpose of that curb at the time that we want to travel are, you know, is that the time that all the delivery vehicles are going to be there, for example? And then the big discussion in our industry, which needs to continue to happen, is having these technologies be completely open so anybody has access to them. So as the pandemic kind of showed up on our doorstep, and we're still dealing with it, we continue to have a lot of discussions about technology fueling mobility as a service. I'm a big advocate and a skeptic, both at the same time, which we can get to in a minute. We've also talked a lot about mobility on demand, and that's a combination of really micro mobility, bike sharing, scooter sharing, as well as micro transit, which is being demonstrated obviously around the country, that really requires some of these technologies. We're not quite there yet on the standard side. We're getting there. We're working a lot at the international level, so that's a good thing. One of the biggest discussions that we've had, and I will tell you a very quick thing about equity, diversity, and inclusion, is that when I started in this industry, and I won't admit to you how many years ago, I was in a male-dominated industry. That's just the way it was. I didn't think a lot about it because the minute I stepped into it, it was there. So now that we have highlighted how critical this is, a lot of us are talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion in terms of technology. There are people who don't have access to technology, and we need to provide them the same tools that we provide everybody with a smartphone and high-speed internet. We need to be more flexible typically the way traditionally we have done transit planning, we haven't been very flexible. So technology is helping us with that. We're making some improvements. In fact, I want to give you a couple of examples. A big shout out to the MBTA. I know there are a couple of folks from the T that are presenting today. I'm in the MBTA service area and certainly have been a rider for many, many years. And some of the work that's been going on, particularly with the pandemic being a critical factor in our transportation, is being nimble enough to actually conceive something that utilizes technology and put it in place in a matter of months. That would never have been possible without technology before. Couple of other examples. One of the many technology platform companies out there at the beginning of the pandemic in the European Union area, and now it's been transferred here as well, is putting things together for passengers like social distancing filters. Am I about to get on a train that is jam-packed and I don't want to get on that train? Technology was put in place to do that. And what if I'm getting on a vehicle where I don't make a reservation, like the MBTA bus that I take? There's no reservation for it. It's a fixed route service, but I really would like to know if seats are taken and what I'm going to encounter when I get there. So then sort of to wrap up, I was recently in Germany for the ITS World Congress. This is just one of their real-time signs that show you when the next buses are going to be arriving and departing from this particular stop. But here in the US, there's been a lot of improvement in real-time information. And a big shout out to everyone who's worked so hard in improving those prediction models. And I list a couple of them here, but really great stuff, and great stuff going on in the payment space as well. So let me take a look at the chat here. Haven't had an opportunity to really do that, but Wesley, you've got your hand up.
Hi, Carol. Thank you. This is a great presentation. I was about to ask a question in the chat as well. You were talking earlier about transit announcements and how important they are for wayfinding around the system. And what I'm curious about is, what are your thoughts on having a pre-recorded human voice for passenger info versus a computer voice? So like in Boston, you have Frank Oglesby who does your voices in a studio, but then in DC right now, their new Metro cars use a text to audio system. And I'm wondering, what do you think is better? Do you think having a pre-recorded human voice is better or a computer voice is better?
That's a really good question. I would be 50-50 on that one, which is, of course, not giving you a good answer. But I think it depends on the environment that you're in. I think sometimes the pre-recorded voice is sufficient. I really am 50-50 on that. And I think the agencies that I've worked for probably would be as well. I like the more, sort of personalized approach myself, but that's just more as a customer, not as someone who's working in the industry.
And I,
Yeah,
I brought up the 7000 series as kind of a bad example because I think some people have complained that audio system's not good. But then I was in San Francisco, and I think their new trains on BART have like a computer voice, and that sounds a little more human. But I just wanted to kind of get the impression of, do we want more human voice? And I think your answer is great. Thank you.
sure, absolutely. All right, let's see, we've got William Palmer has raised hand.
Everyone, and I apologize if there's some background noise. I'll put my message in the chat as well. Carol, I was
Great.
curious for experiences you've had about um, rider adoption and like rider attitudes toward new technology. Because I think
That,
sometimes, yeah. And do you have anything to say on that?
that actually, a number of studies that I did several years ago on the adoption, it's changed a lot over the years since I did those research projects. Again, the adoption in some ways is very much tied to how we look at providing information for everyone. So it goes back to our equity and accessibility and inclusion. And I would say that the adoption is much more significant now than it ever was, because more people are able to access the technology. But there are still challenges in providing the information that you're giving the public without a, for example, without a smartphone. And I would argue that agencies are doing a really good job of that now. Again, I'll just give you a local example of the MBTA. Some of the new real-time signage at bus stops, where traditionally, first of all, a lot of people are at those bus stops because they can't work from home and they need the information, but they might not have a smartphone. Now there's information right at the bus stop for them. So I think the adoption is going up because we're doing a better job with inclusion, but we still have a ways to go.